Okay, we are finally ready to create our first studio scene. I created a very simple landscape here in Infinito. I just used only 4 coconut trees and a baobab tree. So this is a very simple landscape, but I like it to keep simple right now so that I can better explain and show how the whole process works. Alright, so when I'm ready to create the scene, I just need to enter the create section, and here we have some options that we need to set. The first option allows me to enable terrain subdivision levels. This option is available only for the Studio 4 plugin version, but I will show you later how you can do this also in Studio 3 after you have created the scene. And so in this case I have a very simple terrain, but I want to enable also terrain subdivisions, and later on I will show you what this means. This will allow me to have a even better looking terrain with more detail. Alright, then I can set the terrain texture size up the way all to 8 key, and well, for this particular case I'm just leaving it at the minimum. And the next setting is quite important. It's the terrain group name. And this is important because once the scene is generated, Infinito will organize it so that there will be well, a terrain named with the one that you choose here, and all the objects belonging to that terrain will be parented to it. So right now I'm going to change the name and call it my first terrain. And well, then I have the possibility to enable bounding boxes in Studio. This is important if you have a very complex scene, and it's automatically triggered on if the Infinito scene is has a higher has a triangles count of higher than 1 million. This makes a difference in Studio because once the scene is generated, if you try to move the camera or look around, you will see that the scene is the interface is quite slow. So if you enable bounding boxes, this will actually let you move around the studio scene much quicker. In this case, well, let me enable this so that I will show you what this means. And I also want to add the static skydome, so you can switch it off or on. I leave it on, and we can also use a morph percentage. These props that I deployed here on this terrain, they all have morph levels. So what I can do is ask Infinito to apply a random value to these morph levels while the scene is being created. I'm going to set it well, about 70-75%, and then I will show you what this means. Okay, when I'm ready, I just hit the Create Data Scene button, and according to the complexity of the scene, it will take more or less time to generate our studio scene. So now you see that we are looking good, and the scene is being populated with our terrain geometry and all the props that we have deployed on it. Okay, so this is my Infinito scene that I created, and I'm going to move it a little bit below, and this is the studio scene. If you compare these two, you will notice that they are not perfectly identical. And in fact, you see how the baobab tree is different in the Dad Studio scene, and also the trees, the coconut trees, are not perfectly matching the shape that we have set in Infinito. This is because of that morph percentage slider that we used. Random amount, and in fact, if I choose, for example, this coconut tree here, you see how the morph levels, they are not at 0. So what, well, if you are curious to see if the scene would have been exactly the same, I'm going to generate that again. So I'm going to create a new scene, clearing everything. I still have Infinito opened here, so I'm going to create my scene again, and this time I'm telling it to not to use any morph percentage. Alright, I'm going to overwrite my previous terrain, and now I'm going to wait and see. Alright, so this is the scene that I have regenerated without morph percentage this time, and now, as you can see, the props, they are identical both in Infinito and Studio. Okay, let's see some other things that are interesting here in the scene that we have generated in Studio. If we go to the Scene tab, as I told you earlier, I have a group named My First Terrain. Well, actually, this is well, the top item of the group, it's the terrain itself. So if I hide it, you see that is just my terrain. And we also, well, have all the other props parented to it. And we have the static skydome. Infinito also generates 4 extra cameras, which allows to quickly move at one of the terrain corners. So besides the main camera, which is the one that is enabled by default, you can also switch to the northwest camera, the northeast camera, the southeast, and by last to the southwest camera, so that you can actually move in a breeze to each of the terrain corners. You see what I said earlier about bounding boxes. This is not a very complex scene, but when you have a dozen and dozen of items, you well probably need to switch the draw style to solid bounding box, and this way you see that you have a much faster interface and a very quicker way to move and position your scene where you like. And when you are done, where you have found the right place where you want to be, you just enable the texture shaded draw style option, and well, you have your scene back again. And another thing that I wanted to show is also the enable subdivision option that we spoke about earlier. So if I select my first terrain object and I move to parameters, and well, let me move the window a little bit here, and if I go to mesh resolution, you see that now I'm using the base resolution, but I can switch to higher resolution if I like, and in that case I'm getting a more detailed terrain. It's not easily seen from this distance, but let me go a little bit closer. I'm a few centimeters away from the terrain surface, and still with the base resolution level. If now I choose the high resolution level, you will see how each quad will be subdivided into 4 quads, and this will result in a much smoother surface. So this is not always necessary, but if you are going to render and have the camera quite close to your terrain, I believe that setting the high resolution level will give you an extra amount of nice detail. Okay, and with this tutorial I have just ended the first batch of basic tutorials about Infinito, and I will certainly make more advanced and complex tutorials where I will be showing how to create more complex scenes and how also to apply some post work and shaders to the terrain, so that your final result will be even more nice. Bye.